For tonight's class, I have a foam roller. I have a short foam roller. You can also use like a small squishy ball. We're only going to use it at the beginning. So if you don't have it, you can also try to use a block. A block might help, or even a pillow between your knees. I have a glider. A paper plate would work. Also, pants on the hard floor, or socks on a hard floor, or even the blanket. I do have the blanket. We are going to be spending some time on your knees tonight, so I would definitely have that. And then I have 2 blocks. So we're going to start this class on our knees and on the blanket. And this is just we'll return to this movement several times throughout the practice in different ways. But we're going to start with your knees, and you might have your blocks for your elbows, or you can have your hands on the floor. I am opting to use blocks for my elbows, but hands on the floor would work as well. You are going to start by taking the knees as wide as possible. And if you can see, my foot is sticking out over here. I'll show you this from the back before we get into it, so you can see this is not child's pose. This is kind of like a frog pose. So the knees are as wide as you are comfortable having your knees. And your heels are in line with your knees, so your shins are kind of parallel to each other than that typical child's pose where toes touch, taking the lower legs out as far as possible. So we're going to start in this position and hold it for a while. So first, come down either to your hands on the floor or elbows on your blocks at either the lowest or the second to lowest height. And we're just going to start by starting to sense what's going on, where you feel sensation. And where you feel sensation is where you feel sensation. So as I am starting to move into this position, even though it's a stretch on my inner thighs, and I do feel as if my inner thighs are lengthening, I also feel some sensation on the sides of my hip. And when I'm looking for sensation, I'm not looking for pain, although I might feel some extra length or an extra stretch. I want to kind of mitigate where or how deep I go into this, something that I can sustain, something that I can tolerate. And this is a passive stretch. So we're holding this passive stretch for a couple of minutes just to begin. But while we're here, we might as well do some other things. So one thing that you might start to do is to take your shoulders up and down. So your shoulder blades can glide up towards your ears, and they can glide down towards your hips. And as you're doing that, I'm going to change position so that you can see the shape of my spine. So in this position, I'm not drooping down towards the floor. I'm pushing my hands or my elbows into the blocks and moving my spine away. I'm not arching my back, and I'm not rounding my back. I'm trying to find a nice long spine. And after a few of those up and down shrugs, you might start to take your shoulder blades towards your spine and then push your spine away from the floor. You're doing that protraction and retraction in your shoulder blades, gliding them towards the spine and then as far away from the spine. This is not movement of the spine. The spine is staying pretty straight. You're just allowing your shoulder blades to glide down and up. And as we're here, we're going to now add a little bit of resistance. So start to squeeze your thighs in towards each other. So you're not necessarily moving the knees on the floor, just changing the direction in which the knees are moving. So at first we were pushing them out. Now we're squeezing them in towards each other. So we're creating a contraction of the inner thigh muscles. And each 3 or 4 seconds, you're going to create a little bit more contraction. So really try to squeeze without moving the legs. Just squeeze the inner thighs towards each other, like you're trying to squeeze that blanket together. Good. And then as you're ready, go ahead and come up. We'll return to this, as I said, in several different ways throughout the practice. But that first is just trying to bring awareness to your inner thigh muscles or your adductor muscles and start to create a little bit of space from the get-go. So we're going to come down onto our back now. Have your foam roller close by. And take the foam roller between your knees, so the lower inner portion of your thighs, and have your feet on the wall. Your knees are going to be bent at about 90 degrees and your hips below your knees. And just start to lift the heels off the wall. So the balls of the toes remain on the wall, the heels lift away from the wall. And lift your hips off the wall as you squeeze the block between your thighs. We're just going to go down and up a few times. So squeeze the roller or the block or the ball between your thighs and lift the hips off the floor. Heels remain off the floor as you go down and up with the hips. As you lift the hips off the floor, can you keep your pelvis in line with your rib cage? So instead of arching your back or rounding your spine, can you try to keep your lower back in that neutral position? And the next time you lift your hips off the floor, stay off the floor and start to look down at your knees. You're going to push your right knee up towards the ceiling as the back of your left pelvis moves towards the floor. It's still off the floor, but it's shifting down towards the floor. And then you're going to go the opposite way. So your left knee is going to reach up towards the sky or the ceiling as the back of your right pelvis moves closer towards the floor. So you're shifting the hips, and that roller or the ball or the block is rolling between your inner thighs as you shift one knee up and one knee down. We're also going to explore this in several different ways. So this is a hip shift. It's an internal-external rotation. And as you can feel as we continue to do this, there is some inner thigh awareness. Take a break. Remove the roller from between the thighs and hug the knees in towards the chest. You might take the legs wider just to give a little stretch of the inner thighs. We're going to return to this with an option to progress. So take the roller or the ball or the block and bring it back towards the knees of the inner thighs. This time you're going to keep your heel on the ground or on the wall. So lift your right leg straight up towards the sky as the left foot stays on the wall. You can either point your toe or flex your ankle, whichever way gives you more of an awareness of reaching up. Then press the left foot into the wall and lift the hips. Now push the whole foot up towards the sky, and you'll feel the back of the left pelvis move towards the floor, and then shift the opposite way. So right leg is straight, left knee is bent with the full foot on the wall, and you're trying to roll the roller between your inner thighs as the foot of your right leg goes up towards the sky and then away from the sky. Do one more on this side, and then we're going to switch legs. So straighten the left leg. Find if you prefer to have that toe pointed or the heel reaching towards the sky. And then right foot is fully on the wall. Lift the hips off the wall and start by reaching the right foot up or the left foot up towards the sky as the back of the right pelvis moves towards the floor, and then shift. And as you'll see, it's hard to keep the legs kind of in the same plane with one leg straight. So try your best. And you might feel the inner thigh. You also might feel hamstrings. You might feel outer hips. So we are including all areas of the hips. Good. Release. Go ahead and remove the foam roller. Bring the knees back to the chest. Again, perhaps open the legs, allowing the inner thighs to stretch. And then come up. And you can move away from the wall. So we are done with the foam roller. So if you want to move that out of the way so it's not in the way as we start to come further away from the floor, you can do that. I still have my blanket on my mat. So we're going to have both blocks. And we're going to start lying on your right side. And anytime we're lying on our side, typically we want to make a straight line. So in other words, we don't want to have our feet way out in front of us. We want to keep our heels, our knees, our hips, and our shoulders all in one plane. I'm going to take one block and place it out in front of you. Your left knee is going to rest on top of the block out in front of you. Your right leg remains straight and in line with your hip. You can be on your elbow. You can be on your upper arm, or you can be with your head on your arm. Whichever place that you choose, stay stable in your core. So if you are on your elbow, make sure to lift your rib cage away from the floor. So keeping this lower leg, the right leg, in line with your hip, you're going to lift the leg off the ground, flex the ankles, and then turn the toes down towards the floor, and then turn the toes up towards the sky. So we're just going to do a few rotations of the lower leg, toes, the whole leg turning down towards the floor so the toes touch, and then the whole leg. So it's not just the lower leg, it's all the way up in your upper inner thigh. And then go ahead and lift the leg off the ground. Keep the knee in line with your hip and bend the heel towards your hip. And then straighten it. So what we're looking for here is when we bend the knee, does our left knee go forward? We want to keep it back in line with the front of the hip. And you can kind of glance down and look to see, does your knee come forward, or are you able to keep it in line with the front of your pelvis? And as you bend and straighten with the leg off the ground, you'll start to feel, oh yeah, this is an inner thigh thing. And go ahead and straighten it. And if you are on your arm, we're going to come up. We're going to take the other block, and you're going to lie it flat on your inner thigh. So the inner right thigh. And we're going to lift and hold it. So the block is not a weight, right? There is some weight to the block, But what you want to feel is as if you are pushing the inner thigh to lift the block higher. And as you're here, you're keeping your rib cage away from the floor. And now this knee that's on the block here, that also can be a way to tap into our adductors of this top thigh. So start to press your left inner knee down into the block as you lift this leg a little bit higher. Good. Keeping the block on the thigh, can you bend and straighten your right knee a couple of more times? Feel your adductors burning yet? Good. Go ahead and release the block that's on your thigh. Take your left hand and place it in front of your body on the floor. Bend your left knee or your right knee, the one that's on the floor. We're going to start to press into the knee that's on the block to lift the right hip off the floor. And then lower. So press into the block with your knee to lift your right hip off the floor. So this is level 1. We're not just lifting the right hip off the floor, we're pressing down into the knee to lift. One more time, hold. Press the knee down a little bit. You can also feel this is engaging the outer hip as well. And then lower. And we're going to take this to the next level. So if that was challenging, you can stay at that level. I'm going to take both blocks and stack the flat sides on top of each other. The right knee is going to rest on the floor, right in line with the bottom block. We're going to come back down onto our right elbow and take the left knee on top of the block. So this is a variation of a Copenhagen plank. So you're going to press the left knee into the block and lift the hips off the floor. This is level 1. Maybe you press a little bit more and you bring your right leg forward. This is level 2. Maybe you straighten your right leg out in front as you push down on the block with your right. I don't see that you all are doing it, so maybe I'll show you this way. So my left knee is on top. My left knee or my right knee is in line with the block. Level 1 is just to lift with the right knee staying on the ground. Level 2 is to bring that leg forward. Level 3 is to reach that leg forward. Good. And maybe this angle, hips off, here, here. Good. So we're going to go through these all on the other side. So now we're resting on our left side. We're finding the straight line from heel, hip to shoulder. Deciding if we want to be up on the elbow with the rib cage away from the floor, on our hand, or on our arm. The top knee, the left knee, is going to rest on the block about in line with your hip. Making sure that you're not rocking forward, so you're staying on the side. Keeping your left leg in line with the hip. I'm going to lift the left leg off the ground, and then first we're just going to add rotation. So we're turning the whole leg, toes down towards the floor, and then whole leg to where the toes point up. And as you're doing this, sometimes it helps to keep your hand on your hip so you can notice if you're rocking your torso or your pelvis forward and back, or if you're able to isolate that movement inside the hip joint. And then find neutral with the toes pointing straight forward. Make sure the knee's in line with your hip point as you start to bend and straighten the left knee. Good. And what you start to notice is that one side might feel a little bit different than the other. The left knee is off the floor. So the knee's hovering above the floor. And it's staying in line with the front of the pelvis. Again, you can kind of peek between your thighs to see if you can see your knee. You don't want to be able to see your knee. Good. And then straighten the leg. We're going to come up onto the elbow now, lifting the rib cage away from the floor. Take the block, the second block, and place it on your inner left thigh. Keep the rib cage moving away from the floor and the pelvis stacked, and just lift and lower your left leg. So it's not a weight, but you feel as if you're pushing that part of your thigh into the block to lift the leg off the floor. So it's more of a feedback. And the next time you lift, keep it lifted and start to bend and straighten the knee. This one keeps you honest. If the knee moves too much, the block falls off. Good. Go ahead and remove the block. Place it on top of the block that's out in front of you. And then first, we're just going to start to activate this inner right thigh again. So press the knee down into your stack. Bend your left knee to lift your hips off the ground. So this one you can be using a bit of the oblique, but as you lift, start to feel that you are pressing the knee into the block. And go ahead and lower. And then we're going into that Copenhagen plank, which is side plank with attention to the adductor muscles, the inner thigh muscles. So you're going to stack the block on your mat. The right knee will be on top of your little stack. The left knee will be out in front. Level one is just pushing through the knee to lift the hips off the floor. And then start to push the knee a little bit more into the block. Maybe you can lift that left knee or left knee forward, and maybe you can straighten it out in front of you. So whichever level you feel you can maintain, you can come down and try it again. Maybe there's too much too much sensation and you want to stack the blanket on top of the blocks. You can use that as an option. You can maybe lift and lower that bottom leg if you're not ready to take it out in front of you. So just find somewhere where you can press. So Lisa, I think I see what you're doing. You have your knees out in front of you, which is going to be virtually impossible. My knee is in line with my hip on the blocks. There you go. Same with you, Barbara, you're doing the same thing. All of you are doing the same thing. And you're probably wondering why this is so freaking hard. So again, I'll show it from a different angle. We moved the blocks so that now our blocks are in line with the front of our pelvis, right? So the knees are no longer out in front of you. They're down in line with your body. So it's like a side plank, right? My knee is in line with my hip here. The other knee comes forward. Are we getting it? Yeah, I still see that this is confusing. So we'll just leave it and maybe return to this video and try it again another way. Okay, so come up to hands and knees and do the first little adductor stretch. So you're gonna start on hands and knees or elbows. You can be on your elbows as well. You're gonna cross your right leg over your left lower leg and put the knee on the floor and then push your hips back. You can ease forward, take that knee a little further away from the back of your knee, and maybe the elbows come to the floor. And the stretch is the knee that is forward. And then you might go even further back. And shift forward and switch legs. So your right knee staying on the ground, left leg crosses over your lower leg. Start with the knee in right behind the right thigh and push your hips back. And then start to ease your left knee further back. And you're thinking all the time that you're getting deeper into the front inner thigh. So the leg of the thigh, you're kind of sinking into that to release it. And then you can go as far back as is comfortable. So you're thinking more of the stretch in the inner front thigh. Good. We're going to take one block. I'm going to show this from different angles. We'll start from the front angle. If being on your knee on this block does not sound comfortable, take your blanket and stack it on top of your block. We're going to start with the left knee on the block and the right knee on the floor beside it. Hands are on the floor, so you're in a tabletop position. And you're going to push the knee into the block. So the left knee is going to push hard down into the block. And your right knee is going to come straight up inside your left thigh. I'll show this from different angles. So from the back, you're bringing it up and down. And yes, the right hip is the hip, or the leg is the leg that's moving, but the leg that you're paying attention to is the leg that's on the block. So if you think of each time you push down, the inner thighs come together. That's going to create that awareness of the inner left thigh moving in rather than the hip leaning out like this. So we don't want this to happen. We want the left inner hip, outer hip, to move or to stay neutral, and the inner thigh to move towards the knee that's lifting. So do that a few more times and just notice, is your left hip pushing out to the side? What do you need to do to keep it right above your knee? The right knee is not going back. It's staying right inside your left inner thigh. So it's not reaching back. It's staying right inside your inner left thigh. So I'm not doing this. That's not what we're doing. It's down and up. Good. Bring your right knee to rest back on the floor. Remove the blocks away from your mat and fold your mat in half. And take your blanket, keep it on the mat, and bring a slider underneath your left knee. So the knee that was just on the block is the knee that's on the slider. We're going back to that position that we did at the beginning of class. So slide your knees wide apart. And then slide them back together. So we're starting with the hands on the floor, right? We're taking the left knee out as far as we can to bring it back in. You kind of have to crawl your hands. So first, we're just getting used to this movement of separating the legs and bringing them back together. And the next time you slide the left leg out, stay out, press your knee more into the glider. Imagine you're going to close them. Feel what engages as you're thinking of closing them, and then closing them. So we're doing it 3 more times with that pause, push, pretend to squeeze, then squeeze. Out as far as you can, push down, pretend to squeeze, then squeeze. Last time like that. Pretend to squeeze, a lift, and then come up to your knees. Bring your left leg out to the side. Heel is in line with your right knee. You can either tuck your right toes under or keep the foot pointing back, whatever's more comfortable. We're going to start by tucking your pelvis. So your tailbone is reaching straight down towards the ground, and you feel long in the front of your left hip or your right hip. Bring your left hand to your knee, push the knee out over your toe, and then bring it back in. So the first few times, you're just getting used to that movement. Keeping the tailbone reaching down towards the ground. Pelvis is tucked. Front of your right hip is long. The next time you go forward, stay forward. Start to push your left heel hard down into the ground. And then as if you're going to bring your right knee and your left heel together. So squeeze them together. You should feel a little bit going on in your inner right thigh. And then keep that awareness of the heel dragging in as you come back to where you started. And now take your foot onto the glider. If you have your right toes pointed, you might want to tuck them for more stability. So now we're going to have toes point in the same direction as the front of your body. Untuck your pelvis, front of your left groin, right groin really long. Only go as far out as you think you can bring it back in. So push the foot out. Push down to squeeze back. Out, push down to squeeze back. Only go as far out as you can, bring it back in. Notice when your pelvis starts to dip forward. And yes, you can do this with your hands on the ground if being up on your knee is too much. Good. Come up, glide it back in. Take that foot out, not gliding. Bring the hands down onto the floor. Point your right toes back and sit your hips back towards the heel. Yes. Keep pointing the toes forward. And then turn the toes up towards the sky and just roll the heel on the floor. So the toes are making a windshield wiper movement. Come back onto your knee. Keep your left hand on the ground and reach your right hand underneath your left arm towards your left foot. Maybe you crawl your left fingers forward, straightening your arm with your bicep beside your ear. Hands on the ground, come up. We're going to switch to the other side. So if you need to adjust your mat and your blanket like I do, take the time to do that. So your left knee is going to be on the blanket on the mat. Your right knee is going to start on your glider, or maybe you have a second blanket if being on a glider is not comfortable, or maybe your pants just move. So shins are in line with your knees, so our toes aren't in. Hands start on the floor, and we're just starting with that glide out and glide back in. So these first few moves, we're getting used to where our hands need to be placed. We're getting used to sensation in our inner thighs, noticing the difference between right and left. Spine is nice and long. The knees on the glider, you're going only as far out as you can bring it back in. And then the next time you go out, stay out. Start to push the right knee down into the glider and pretend like you're going to bring them back together and feel what engages, and then use that to glide back in. We're going to do 3 more of those. So take the knee out wide, push down, glide back. Glide out. Maybe you start to feel like you have a little bit more space in your inner thighs. Maybe you feel as if your inner thighs are working a little bit more than normal. And then the next time you glide in, stay in, and you're going to come up onto your left knee. Right heel is in line with your left knee. When we start, our shoulder, hip, and knee are all in one line. Reach tailbone down, so that slight tuck of your pelvis to find a nice length in the front of your hip. And then right hand on your knee, push the knee out over your toe, keep the heel on the ground, and then come back. So the first few times, we're just seeing how far forward we can push the knee of our toe, keeping the heel on the ground. We're thinking of keeping the front of our left hip open, so we're not pushing our butt back. Stacking knee, hip, shoulder, and then go as deep as you can. Push your right heel down, and as if you were going to squeeze your left knee and your heel together. So pull them in and hold. Keep the knee out over your toe. Increasing dorsiflexion is important. So the knee going forward of the toe is important if you have accessibility to it. Is that right? I don't think so. Come out of it. And then you're going to take your foot on the glider. Turn the toes pointing towards the long edge of your mat. You start with hands on the ground and pushing the legs straight out. If you want to just go straight to up on your knees, you can do that. But the right leg stays straight. Still have the front of the left groin open, unless you have the hands on the ground and then it's flexed and you're just feeling slightly different sensation in your inner right thigh. Next time you go out, push down a little bit more and drag it back in. So either up on your knee or down on your hands, it doesn't matter. All we're looking for is, can we connect to that sensation of your inner thigh being what pulls your foot back in. Good. Go ahead and drag it back in. Remove the roller or the glider. Tuck your, or point your toe and bring your hands down, and you're going to sit back and stretch. And then turn the toes up towards the sky and windshield wiper the leg in and out. Come forward slightly. Keep your right hand on the ground. Thread the needle, reaching your left hand toward your right foot, maybe crawling your right hand forward. Use your hands to push yourself back up. Come to your knees. We forgot to do the block on this side, so we're going to do the block at the end. The blanket on the block. Right knee on the block. And glide your left knee down and up your inner right thigh. So as you're doing this, right hip stays hugged in, and that left knee is going up and down your inner right thigh without the hip pushing out to the side. So we avoid this. This stays in line with your knee. So your right hip stays in line with your knee. As your left hip just goes up towards the sky. This is what we did on our back at the beginning of the practice with the foam roller between our knees. Good. All right. We are done with the blanket. Keep a glider close by. Keep a block close by. And take your mat long. So our inner thigh muscles, our adductor muscles, are muscles that help us balance. They're muscles that create strength and stability in the pelvis. They also are deeply connected to our core. So this next experiment that we're going to do, if you've done yoga with me, you've done this probably before, is doing kind of a traditional yoga flow, but with a block. So you're going to take the block and place it as high up your inner thighs as you can. The front of your block should be flush with the fronts of your thighs. So walk your feet as close together as you can. First thing we're going to do is just test. Like a Pez dispenser, your inner thighs are going to squeeze, and as if it could roll the block and Pez it out the back of your thighs. So just see if you can create that action with your inner thighs. So squeeze and then roll as if you wanted to push the block out the back of your thighs. And then come to the back of your mat. Still, feet are as close as possible. Feel that awareness of inner thighs and that Pez. And with an inhale, reach your arms over your head and just notice what happens to your ribs and your pelvis as you squeeze the block. Hopefully it kind of avoids that flaring of the ribs forward, which is not always wrong. A back bend is not wrong, but not what we're doing today. And then start to bend your knees. Pause your block back between your thighs as you hinge and fold. Bring your hands to your shins and bring your spine parallel to the floor, reaching the chest towards the front of your mat. Find that Pez of your inner thighs. And then fold again. Press down through your feet, pez. Stand up, straighten your legs, reach your arms up, gaze up, and then bring your hands back to your heart. We're going to do that 2 more times. So the goal here is to stay aware of what's going on with the block between your thighs, and don't think too hard about any other thing. Inhale, reach up. Start to bend your knees, pez. Hinge from your hips and fold. Hands to your shins, pez, stretch your spine long. Exhale, fold. Press through your feet, pez hard as you stand up. Notice what happens to your pelvis or doesn't happen to your pelvis as you stand. One more time, and then we'll go a little further. Inhale, reach your arms up. Pez, bend the knees, hinge. Hands to your shins, stretch the chest towards the front edge of your mat, and then hands to the ground. Walk forward to a downward facing dog. So hands are about shoulder distance apart. Walk your feet a little closer, pez, and reach your sit bones high towards the sky. Shift forward to your knees. So you have 2 options as we move through this kind of flow. We are going to explore plank, but another option if plank is not comfortable on your wrist is to come down to your knees and just our elbows and just hover your knees off the floor. So let's all try that. Come down onto your elbows. Stretch your spine long, gaze between your thumbs. Squeeze and pez your block. And then just hover your knees about 1 inch off the floor. So this is a variation if plank is not in your wheelhouse today. Good. Come back to your hands. Or you can stay on your elbows and go into elbow down dog. So either find down dog or that elbow down dog. Pez the block. And then come forward either to that bear that we just did or plank and pause. So really find the block between your thighs and pez the heck out of it. And notice what your plank feels like. And then come back to down dog. And do that just a couple of more times. So shifting forward and back from down dog and plank. All the while using that awareness of the pez of the block to pull you back into the down dog and to shift you into a really strong plank. Good. The next time you come back into downward facing dog, walk your hands back to the back of your mat and then stand up. So we're going to add in a chair pose. So with the block still between your thighs, start to pez and then bend the knees, push the shins back and sit the hips back. You can go deep to where your spine is facing the floor, or you can challenge the squat by bringing your spine more upright. Hands reach back. Continue to pez. Hands reach straight out in front of you. Continue to pez. Hands reach by your ears. Exhale. Keep the knees slightly bent and fold. Inhale, hands to your shin, stretch your chest forward. Nice long spine. Exhale, fold. Walk forward one more time to downward facing dog. Really sense what that awareness of your adductors does to your down dog. How does it change it? And then one more time in plank. How does the awareness of using your inner thighs change your plank? Release the knees to the floor. Release the block. And sit back in child's pose. Let the knees open and let the toes touch. Good. Shift forward to tabletop. Think of the block between your thighs. Tuck your toes. Hover the knees. Think of the block. Pez. And then back to downward facing dog. Think of the block. Pez. Knees can be as bent as you need them. Just have that awareness of your inner thighs and walk your hands back to forward fold. Knees bent. Pez. Hands to your shin, stretch your chest forward. Pez. Keep the hips low, sit them back. Chair pose. Pez. And stand. We're going to grab our block. I'm going to place it off at the right end of your mat so that your right foot is on the block. I'm going to step the right block on, or the right foot on the block. Left foot is on the ground next to the block. So the same thing you did on your knee. We're now going to do it on the block. So press down through the right foot and shift your left hip high. And then bend and tap. And do that a couple of times. So really push through the foot on the block. Think of the inner thigh pezzing to shift and lift your left hip. Next time you lift, stand and steady your hips. Bend your left knee forward. And then bring it down and step down. You're going to turn the block now long ways and rest your foot on the block with your toe pointing towards that top edge of your mat and hop your left leg away. So warrior two. Left toes turn in slightly. Right foot is on the block. Start to push your foot into the block. And then hands out in front. Reach the hips back as you reach the hands towards the floor. And then come up. Bring the arms over your head. Maybe walk your left foot out a little bit more. So basically warrior two, right foot on the block, left foot on the floor. Imagine your inner thighs doing that squeeze together. And then as if you could lift your right foot off the block. It's impossible, but as if you could. Hands to your hips. Hop the left foot in and turn your toe out. So now goddess, sink deep and straighten both legs. Sink deep and straighten both legs. So knees are pressing out to track the toes. One more, go low, stay low. And squeeze the heels in towards each other. Hands behind your head and go side to side. A little side crunch. Good. Stand up. Come off of your mat. Bring your left foot to a glider. Right foot like you're in warrior two. Push out, glide in. If you need something to hold on to for balance, Please, by all means, do that. You can just stay on your mat and continue to use the block if this does not feel safe. You glide out and glide in. Good. Come back onto your block. Right foot on the block. Do that hip shift again. So down and up. And then maybe lift the left knee forward. Maybe find tree pose. Maybe grab your toe, take the knee out. Maybe adductor length. Or not. All right, let's do the other side. The left foot is on the block. Taking it to the left edge of your mat so you have somewhere to extend to. You're just going to bend the left knee and step the foot on the ground, then push the foot down and hike the right hip. Try to keep the right foot close to your leg. And this one for me is much harder. I always find it curious when something is so easy on one side and I have a struggle on the other side. Lift and hold, balance out your pelvis. Bring your right knee forward, maybe balance. And you'll feel, Barbara, I see how well you are balancing, and that makes me really happy. Adductor strength. Good. And then take the block long ways towards the short edge of your mat. Left foot on the block. Safely hop your right foot out to a distance that is comfortable for you. Press the foot into the block, press the foot into the floor. Right turn in slightly, arms out in front. Hinge, so push the hips back, reach down towards the floor, keep pushing your left knee. And that little stretch. Then come up, arms over the head and out. Then start to push the feet down and squeeze heels together. Think as if you could lift your left foot off the block. Think as if you could push your heels together. And then turn your right toes out slightly. We're going into that goddess, so down and up. As you go down, think of your heels coming in towards each other. I'm going to keep the knees pointing the direction of your toes. So don't let them collapse in. Feeling that lengthening of your inner thigh. Go down and hold. Hands behind your head and side to side. Keep pushing the knees out. Keep dragging the heels in towards each other. And come up. Right foot on a glider. Left foot turns out like warrior two. And we're going to go in and out of that warrior two. It's so much harder on this side for me. So finding that drag with the foot pushing down, both feet pushing down, and that right foot really dragging in. And as you can see, my knee is going over my toe. That's okay. Good. Final thing. Come back into the hip shift or hip hike. Left foot on the block. Going down and up a few times. Let's see. Feel a little bit more steady. And then knee forward. Maybe foot to thigh or tree. Pushing your foot and your thigh together. Maybe you grab your foot and just hold. Maybe grab toe and reach. Good. Release. And we will end where we started. So coming into that frog stretch, this time very passive. So stretch your blanket out. Take your knees at a comfortable position and take your shins out. Lift your chest away from the floor and take 5 to 10 deep breaths. Noticing where you continue to hold tension and gripping. Notice if you feel as if you could come closer to doing those wide leg splits. Just notice. And then when you're ready, walk your knees together and come into child's pose with the knees together. Let the head rest either on the floor or on a block out in front of you.